Sounds good. Well, yeah. Thanks everyone that's attended. Appreciate your time. And to hear us, I guess, talk about paid social and how we can work it into any of your existing channels and exactly how we can support on a performance model as well. So through myself and a couple of other members of the team running you guys through the service and exactly how it can support you, but as well as that, just a bit more about Incubeta NMPi and us as a business, really. So initially, always important to start with the reasons why we're here in the first place. We kind of put that into 3 separate sections that we'll be running you guys through today. So number 1, to introduce you to the rebrand of Incubeta NMPi and our paid social offering. So for the people that do know who NMPi are, we've gone through an exciting rebrand in the last few months and weeks. That'd be nice to kind of introduce you into that and Incubeta NMPi as a whole. Secondly, to show you what we do alongside our day-to-day. We're very proud as a team to be able to kind of shout about the kind of parts of the stuff that we do within the company that doesn't really sit within our kind of performance remit. And then finally, the main reason we're here, running through the next steps in onboarding and scoping out these opportunities. So today is to kind of give you a brief overview of exactly how we can support. And then it will be the case of, if it is of interest to you or the brands that you look after, actually running you through that in a bit more detail after the call. Cool. Housekeeping. We'll try and keep everything to 30 to 45 minutes, and then have a few minutes for questions if you have any questions. And if it's easier, feel free to ask them in the chat, and we could try and answer them at the end. I believe Chloe said that the session's being recorded as well, so which is always great. Cool. In terms of the agenda, it'll be myself going through. I mean, we've already been through why we're here. Then we'll be going through a little bit about us as a business, our social responsibilities as a company, and then I'll be handing over to the social team who will be taking you through kind of what makes us different as a social agency, our servicing, a case study, and then a little bit around the cross-channel abilities that we have as a business. Then go through next steps with myself, and then, as mentioned, the Q&A right at the end as well. Cool. So to go through and initially to introduce you to the team, really. So this is the team that you have on the call today. Believe Vaz is having a few technical issues. So Vaz is the newest member of the paid social team, an exciting part of the team. But I'll hand over to James if you want to introduce yourself quickly.
Thanks, Callum. Hi, everyone. I'm James, and yeah, I'm a senior analyst on the paid social team. So I typically build, run, and optimize our paid social accounts. So
cool. And then over to yourself, Jack.
Awesome. Yes, I'm Jack. Very nice to meet you all. I'm the team lead on the social side, so supporting everything from a strategic perspective to our long-term goals with our Facebook activity and the products that we use.
Perfect. And then I'm Callum, so I am on the partnership side, so we'll be there for initial scoping out of opportunities and kind of getting the opportunity through the door, I guess, before handing over to the social team to begin the actual running and optimizing of campaigns. Cool. In terms of Incubeta as a whole, so as mentioned, we've gone through a little bit of a rebrand, but the kind of message for NMPi and Incubeta as a whole is always the same. We're a global team of 440 creators, thinkers, makers and doers, and that kind of falls into a number of different remits when it comes to the digital outlook of this space in this vertical. Just to kind of go through a number of aspects of Incubeta, we have DQ&A, which is a marketing and ad tech consultancy. So they actually sell the suite of Google marketing platform products, the likes of SA360 and DV360 that we use here in-house as an agency. You have Incubeta Joystick, which is a creative agency, so for any of the kind of creative services that we offer, and we're able to utilize them alongside our performance offering to push through when optimizing and kind of different parts of campaigns. And to kind of go through in a bit more detail, you have Incubeta NMPi, which is the part that the 3 of us fall under. We are a long-founded member of the affiliate space. So initially were founded in 2004 as Net Media Planet, which some people may know, some people will not know. Kind of falls within the paid search space, typically running alongside a company through affiliates. Google obviously hammered home this message that you weren't able to do this, and it meant that a lot of publishers that were in this vertical, in this space, shut off what they were doing. But we saw this as an idea to grow and to develop as more of a search agency and offer this and do this on a pure performance model. So this kind of changed our thinking and the way we approached this service. We were then turned into NMPi in 2009 and specialised not just in search, but having a look over programmatic display and also paid social. In 2013, we were then acquired by Incubeta, still under NMPi and still holding true to the services that we kind of begun with and we've kind of developed. And now, earlier in April, so earlier this year, we were unveiled as a kind of stronger part of the Incubeta group and under Incubeta NMPi, with the idea that kind of further this year will be just known as Incubeta as a whole agency model. But cool, to kind of go through Incubeta NMPi and us as an actual agency, the reason we speak through the affiliate space and the reason that we're able to offer what we offer through affiliates is because we do everything on a pure performance model. So what this pure performance model entails for brands is the fact that we can do everything on a pure performance model. So we'll front the media spend ourselves, and we only paid a CPA once we drive results. So extremely results driven. And the reason we're here today is that to kind of push this service through from a paid social perspective. Very confident in saying we're probably one of maybe one or two very limited amount of agencies that are able to kind of develop a service on a pure performance model for paid social. And this is the kind of reason we're here today, to see if this is something that will be of interest to you and also your brand as well. Cool. In terms of, I guess, more the paid media side of things, I think it's also important to note the importance of paid media and the reason why we're able to do this. James will go through this in a bit more detail from an actual social perspective, but we've kind of entailed the 4 reasons for paid media. So number 1 is the ability to target and target your users and your customers. Number 2 is to be able to retarget. So this is being able to kind of look at people that are already coming to your site and using that information to be able to show them a sale or a product that you have that might be of interest to them. The third area of this is prospecting. So this is actually being able to utilize the retargeting and utilizing that pool of data to be able to find new customers. And then finally, another kind of key area to our remit is how we optimize campaigns as well. And that's a huge area of how social and paid media in general is being able to work, and we can utilize that. Cool. Kind of final thing from my side to begin with, we're also lucky enough that our services work in a number of different verticals, and we're very fortunate to be able to work in a space where we are working alongside these verticals, whether that's retail, in the travel sector, which you'll see today, and a number of others as well. So always keen to hear about your brands and any of your services in general. Cool. In terms of our social responsibilities, as mentioned, obviously we have our day-to-day, which is all performance-based and going through the actual services themselves. But as a business, we think it's really important to be able to shout out about the stuff that we do alongside our day-to-day. What this means is, as a business, we've been able to develop kind of a focus area around our social responsibilities, and that's split into 3 different kind of remits and areas. So community, environment, and the workplace. And that's both kind of internal and external. And what that's meant as a company, not just as NMPi, but as Incubeta, is we have a number of different committees that we're able to be part of and can run and do it alongside our day-to-day. So as you can see on the screen, here are the number of the committees that we could be a part of if we wanted to. So the charity, D&I, diversity and inclusion, mental wellbeing, social and sustainability. So I thought it'd be really cool today just to kind of run you through just, I guess, the mission statement for each of the committees and to kind of give you an understanding that we're not just here to run paid social, but we're actually an agency that is built around these social responsibilities and how they can kind of form part of us as a company, really. So initially, the first one, I'm very fortunate to be a part of the Mental Wellbeing Committee, with our mission statement being to actively improve employee mental wellbeing and support that across the whole of Incubeta, which is a great part of my role within the company. We have sustainability, obviously a huge part of what brands are trying to achieve now is around sustainability and becoming a sustainable brand. and similar to exactly what we do here. So our mission statement here being to facilitate the reduction of a company and employee environmental impact. And we're always learning new things from the Sustainability Committee. But as well as the internal side of this, as a committee and as a business, we're also able to offer a CO2 offsetting initiative that we've built alongside kind of our services. So this is something we've done with a number of brands across search, where we're able to predict the amount of CO2 we'll be emitting within our paid search activity. So this is an example here that we predicted that will contribute 33 tons of CO2 through PPC activity in 2021. So what we were able to do is offer a carbon offset against these our actual activity, which is a really cool thing to be able to mention. So here are kind of 4 different methods that a brand could choose to kind of a way of offsetting their CO2. I think one that's really cool is UK tree planting, the ability to plant trees off the back of any kind of PPC activity that we're running, and also has an educational element to it as well. Cool. We have the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, which are becoming a really strong part of the company in general, with their mission statement being to develop and maintain a diverse and inclusive culture through improving company processes, taking regular temperature checks and communicating our commitment. Another great and educational part of the committees. We have charity, which their mission statement being creating opportunities for Incubeta UK to give back to the local community. And further afield, which again is something that kind of obviously can be very seasonal. So obviously Christmas time, there's a lot that we're doing and across schools and also within our local area of Islington and Old Street as well. And then final one is social, the SOCO committee. So their mission statement to bring people together and foster positive, happy and inclusive social environment with regular events unifying the whole of Incubeta. So obviously that's been a little bit trickier to do during COVID and lockdowns, but it's something that kind of, I guess, is a main reason why we're all kind of a strong team and have a strong bond per kind of the teams that we work with. Cool. So that's kind of a bit about Incubeta NMPi and Incubeta in general. Now to get over to the kind of important parts, which is our service and in particular paid social. So for context, we look at running across a number of different channels. So CSS probably being the most traditional through the affiliate space, but we also are able to offer paid search, programmatic display, and paid social. And also something that we'll go through today is kind of the cross-channel capabilities that we hold if we were able to run a number of these services. Before I hand over to James, the last kind of point to raise is the fact that all of these are done on a pure performance model, where we're fronting the media spend as well, and everything is being able to kind of utilize the affiliate space as well. Cool. So now I'll hand over to James, who will kind of begin with actually talking about paid social and our strategies that we've put in place.
Cool, thanks, Callum. So with regards to paid social, I'm going to start by looking at the scope and the opportunity that paid social offers, as well as going through some of the inherent risks and challenges associated with the channel. And then I'll run through how I think we can sort of capitalize on those opportunities, while also like navigating those risks and those uncertainties that I'll touch on. And then I'll quickly touch on our servicing framework and how we work with our clients before handing over to Jack, who's going to run through a case study that will hopefully highlight all of these points in action. So starting with the importance of paid social, I think the first point to consider and really point out is the scale of these platforms or social platforms. And I think it's not just the scale, but it's also the rate at which they're growing too. So throughout 2020, social platforms saw a massive increase in overall user volumes, and they also saw a massive increase in the time that these users were spending on these platforms. And I think if you look at the point on the left there, you can see that. So that's taken from the end of 2020. At the end of 2020, there were 4.2 billion active monthly users live across all social media platforms. And I think just within the context of the UK, it was 53 million alone. So as well as the scale, I think it's also worth noting that permanent new habits have been formed throughout the various lockdowns that we've been experienced across the last year and a half. And I think that's across all demographics as well. Everyone's formed those new habits. I think people are spending more time browsing online now and purchasing products online as well. And So yeah, so these growths, or this growth in the scale, and then these changes in habits, I think it really presents an opportunity to reach and acquire new customers in a space where, you know, I think people are naturally browsing content and are naturally engaging with content. So it's a massive opportunity. But yeah, I think despite this growth, if we go to the next slide, paid social advertising, it faces many challenges. So firstly, on the left there, I think major events such as coronavirus and Brexit, I think they've hit advertisers quite hard. You know, margins, media budgets, key priorities, they've all been impacted. And then on top of that, if you look in the middle there, the future of paid socials also going to be affected by wider industry changes that are going on. In particular, I think it's worth calling out the iOS 14 tracking changes and the impact that's going to have on the visibility of opted out iOS users and how that slowly reduces. Also the prospect of a cookieless future and the impacts that's going to have on all digital marketing channels. And then also legislative changes such as the ongoing discussions around the future of Section 230 in the US and the risk of the breakup of big tech as the government gets increasingly involved there. So yeah, so I think it's also, if we look at the point on the right there, it's worth noting that while these challenges are likely to affect all digital channels, because paid social is ultimately still a form of, you know, push marketing, it does naturally sit in the earlier stages of the path to purchase. So as a result, you know, often sees perhaps lower conversion rates than other digital marketing channels, and I think it often has perhaps less of an immediate impact on the business's bottom line than a channel like paid search might have. So I think when businesses might start making decisions about kind of media budgets because of events like Brexit or COVID, I think paid social is often the first one to get hit and get impacted by that. So I think, yeah, as a result of this, we think lots of businesses are, you know, potentially missing out on the opportunity to capitalize on the scale and the long-term performance that paid social can offer, that I highlighted on the previous slide. So if we go to the next slide, I think ultimately that's basically, it's just left us with a channel that has enormous potential, but yeah, also a channel that's full of uncertainties and risks and challenges, particularly those issues that I've just run through. And I think this leaves many advertisers asking on the scale and opportunity offered by social whilst navigating the risk and uncertainties. So yeah, despite those problems, we think we can deliver consistent results and overcome this through the pure performance model. Yeah, so we believe the answer is the pure performance model, which Callum's already touched on. So going on to the next slide. So yeah, why Incubeta NMPi? I think to try and answer that, there are three key areas that we've highlighted here, and that we think sort of help us deliver certainty in such uncertain times. So these are technical, data-driven, and creative. So I mean, in terms of our actual strategy in reality, it runs a lot deeper than that. Obviously, it's going to be tailored to individual clients. But yeah, as an introduction, I thought it was worth just highlighting these 3 points that you can see there. So cool, yeah, we go on with that. Cool. So first one here, technical and connections. So with regards to external connections, we're a Facebook premium partner. So yeah, so through that relationship, we can get close communication with, you know, the experts at Facebook, which allows us to, I guess, be ahead of the curve and organize sort of specialized preparation for industry changes, such as the iOS update that's happening at the moment and has happened over the last couple of weeks. We also get first access to any betas that Facebook are releasing. So yeah, we can stay on top of the platform and any future tests that could be interesting to try out. And then we also have access to dedicated training with Facebook. So yeah, so we're always on top of their best practices, their solutions, suggestions. And then yeah, with regards to internal knowledge, so outside of the specific dedicated social team that Callum introduced earlier, we also have a dedicated tech, feed, and creative team who we work very closely with them to make sure our accounts are run as effectively as possible. And then you can see some of the ways we work with them. So like, you know, a key reason social accounts often underperform is because of their issues with technical setup and particular pixel and catalogs. It causes campaigns and ads to perhaps underperform or under deliver. So yeah, so we can support with making sure they're set up. As a team, you know, internally, we often regularly audit accounts just to make sure they're all set up and they're following what was, I guess, always an evolving best practice. And then finally, we also have multi-channel experience, and we're very much focused, I guess, on having a cross-channel mindset, where we work closely with our other dedicated teams on channels such as search and display as well. Cool. So yeah, I think when I introduced those 3 points, the second one was data, and how our approach is very much data driven. So yeah, we very much like to try and use data to determine our best practice for each individual account. And we do that by focusing on the 3 areas that you can see there. So feeds, site-wide, and also audience insights. So with regards to feeds, as an agency, we've got lots of experience with it, and I think that's given us a lot of insight into what optimizations can lead to a real sort of step change in performance. And yeah, we can do that by incorporating, and we like to do that by incorporating signals like margin, stock, prior performance. And yeah, we take those and put those all into product selection. We can also look at, we like to look at and consider your site-wide data. So that could be seasonality, upcoming promotions. Yeah, we'll always just make sure that our campaigns fit alongside your site-wide activity. And then yeah, finally, we'll always look to try and focus on and unleash the power of your first-party data. I think that's going to become sort of especially important in the future with the the impact of iOS 14 and tracking there. So yeah, so we'd typically try to make the most of that by identifying high-value segments such as long-term customers or maybe frequent customers, and then use our targeting to try and find more of those high-value customers for your brand. Cool. So yeah, the final part, when I had that introduction to our strategy, the final part was creative, and yeah, I guess making the most of compelling and engaging creative to make sure that our social ads stand out. So on the left there, we have a couple of members of our creative team. So they're able to design, build, and optimize new creative variations of perhaps your existing assets, site imagery. I think there's a few examples there actually, if you look in the middle of some stuff they've done. And then what this feeds into, I guess, regardless of whether we're building your creative or perhaps we can also work alongside your in-house team, is this rigorous creative testing process that we like to use. So there's a sort of flow diagram on the right that outlines that. But yeah, the approach we'd use would be firstly to define what key metrics or KPIs it is that we want to use to define or measure performance. So that could be click-through rates, it could be conversion rates, whatever really. The next thing we do is try and establish a clear hypothesis of what it is we're going to test. So, that quite often we might look at whether a video drives better click-through rates than a single image ad. Does this long ad copy work better than short ad copy, slideshow, carousel? We sort of work out what test we want to run. We make sure that's the element we're testing and everything else stays consistent throughout that fair test. And then finally, once we've established some results, we'll look at what we can take away from it, and then just try to make sure that we introduce any winning factors into future tests, so that process is always developing and evolving, and just that the best creative practice is always driven by the results for each individual client. But yeah, I think it's again worth reiterating that that testing framework will be part of the service, regardless of whether it's our creative team creating assets or working with your perhaps in-house team creating assets as well. Cool. And then we're just going to focus on our servicing, so our paid social servicing. So yeah, so whilst we would be working through the affiliate network, I think the relationship you'd have would be more of it would be closer to a traditional relationship. So we'd always have a dedicated social team that would focus on an account. So yeah, so that team would include an analyst such as myself on the left there. So I'd be like or the analyst would be a day-to-day point of contact for questions, concerns, ad hoc requests you might have. We'll also operate as a commercial strategist, and yeah, we'll work to run and optimize the account on a day-to-day basis. And then yeah, as I mentioned on the last slide, work closely with the creative teams and who else to make sure that the best possible strategies in place. Look, moving on to the next hexagon along. There'll always be a more senior member on the team as well, such as Jack. Yeah, so they'll act as a more senior point of contact, and take the lead on perhaps longer term strategy planning side of things, as well as focusing on cross-channel operation and how different channels might be able to work together. Then you've got Nimi next hexagon along, who's our head of performance. So she's the department lead and can help out with strategic support and act as a point of escalation should that be needed. And finally on the right, you've got Paul, who's our head of technology. So him and his team, will offer any technical support and platform support for the various tools that we use. Cool. Okay, so reporting. So I think all the slides I've gone through previously have been talking about how we sort of drive great performance, but also what's I think really important to consider is together, I guess, giving that information to you, providing that information to you. So what we'll do is we'll always put together a dashboard with as much information as possible about what we're doing in the account, what's working, what's not working, just to allow for your own internal reporting. So that could provide insights into all the key metrics, whatever you want in there: click-through rates, conversion rates, sales, revenue, the performance of each individual campaign. I think it's worth noting that this is always fully customizable depending on what you might want to see. So there's an example on the left there running through a dashboard, but the metrics and the info and the layout of that dashboard can be customized depending on what different people might want to see. Cool. And then alongside the dashboard, we also have a servicing framework in place. So as I've already mentioned, as a client, you'd always have an account management team, or account management team at hand for any questions, ad hoc questions, and then we'd also, with regards to like face-to-face or virtual contact time on top of that, we'd look to sort of organise fortnightly or monthly calls where we catch up and discuss and review performance and key actions for the next couple of weeks. So on those calls would typically be the analyst and the strategic lead that I ran for a couple of slides ago. And then on top of that, we've also at the bottom there got quarterly reviews or yearly reviews too. So we come to those with the wider team, and we put a deck together that runs through insights into what hasn't worked, what has worked, and I think we typically try to use that session as a planning session to try and make sure that we're in the best place possible for the next period of time. But again, all of these calls can be and reviews can be bespoke depending on your needs and what works best for you. Cool. So that's everything from me there. I think to try and show you these processes in action, I'll hand over to Jack to run through a paid social case study.
Amazing. Thank you very much, James. Firstly, a tiny bit of extra housekeeping. If my Wi-Fi does cut out at any point, Callum has very kindly agreed to step in for me. I'm in the middle of quite rural Wales with what appears to be a hurricane happening outside, so it's been a little bit temperamental, let's say. Awesome. But to kick off, basically, as James said, what we want to show you now is take you through a journey that shows you how these principles in action really, and how they help us provide this uncertainty, and what provides certainty. What was probably the most uncertain industry of the last year and a half, and that's the travel industry. So this is telling a story of a client we worked with continue to work with called Malatini, who provide luxury safari travel as a travel agency in Africa. So just to take you through the timeline here, obviously a case study quite often refers to an individual campaign that was run or a couple of months, but we're taking you through sort of a full 3 years of our relationship. Don't worry, it won't take that long. But to give you a bit of background, in 2019 we started working together on a performance basis on paid social as well as some other channels. And then in 2020, as I'm sure you're all aware, COVID-19 completely changed life in general, but particularly the travel vertical. Customers lost faith completely, and markets began to close. A lot of companies went out of business completely. And then we now enter into 2021, where we are now as markets to open up, restrictions begin to relax, and we head into the new future, the new normal, to use that phrase. Cool. So to start off with, moving into 2020, the year that travel stood still. There are four key elements of our strategy here. One was being flexible with pausing campaigns as soon as we were asked to by Malatini in March, but this was kept as quite temporary because we wanted to continue that level of exposure at a time when maybe we weren't looking to book travel, but they were still looking to research. I think wanderlust became even more of a thing when people were locked in their homes. There's a lot of pent up energy that we wanted to make sure we were still working with Malatini to capitalize on. Shifts in messaging, which we'll go through a bit more in another slide. Working with much more minimal budgets than we had done previously, showing that flexibility that the performance model provides, where you're not tied to sort of minimum spends, etc. And then finally, optimizing to true value. And again, we'll go into this in a bit more detail, but how we started looking beyond the initial lead and look at the actual likely long-term value of that lead and the probability of it converting into a paid trip, which became particularly important as we headed into that uncertain time. Cool. So focusing first in on trust messaging, and this is where I think, as James went through those three areas earlier, this is where our partnership with our internal creative team really helps things. Malatini launched a travel with confidence policy in June 2020 that gave a lot of confidence around flexibility in bookings and much better cancellation terms, a lot of assurances around sort of hygiene in the places they're going and how safe they are for themselves and their families. Ultimately, a good policy is great, but you need to then communicate it to people, and that's where our creative team came in terms of how we tie that into our creative and copy strategy, and then also into that rigorous testing framework that James talked through earlier, and to prove how much better people are engaged back these change messaging. So you can see here, putting things in like the 100% financial protection and free cancellation meant that we were getting a quarter increase, a 25% increase in click-through rate on those ads, showing a sort of, they're demonstrating the value of making those changes to creative, and also to introducing that policy overall, so giving business-wide insights from what was a paid social creative decision. Cool, and then moving on to the new commercial model. So as I said, like initially, the problem here really is that we're as previously we were looking at leads, cost per lead based on that initial quote that someone submits for on site. Within travel in general, but also particularly within luxury travel, the conversion rate of those quotes to people actually going on the trip can be quite low. So what we wanted to do was to try and shift from looking just at that cost per lead to looking at how can we look at long-term value and the actual expected value. How that was done, if you go onto the next slide, Callum, was adapting our Facebook tag, and this is where our technical expertise, both external and internal, came into things, and pulling in an expected profit figure. What this was built on is things like the budget the person put into their quote, the location they're in, the location they're traveling to, their itinerary dates, the number of travelers. There's loads of different data points that historically Malatini can look back and see how much value that person is likely to have driven from that initial quote. That can then get pulled into our tags, both within Search Ads 360, but then also within Facebook as well, and then used to optimize our campaigns, but then also to build targeting for the future as well, based on who's seeing which leads are converting with the highest expected profit, putting those into lookalike modeling and trying to find more of those. I think, as James mentioned earlier, in terms of leveraging those data points. So hopefully starting to see things opening up a bit. Oh, am I cutting off a bit?
You are cutting off a little bit there. But am I back again now?
Am I back in? Okay. Yeah, don't feel free to jump in, Callum, if it goes off again. Okay. We are on the second last slide of my bit, so hopefully I can get through. Storm has to keep quiet for a little bit. So 2021, markets are opening back up again. And what we need to be reactive as possible to these changes and pushing campaigns back up again and changing messaging as well, from people looking for shorter term holidays to longer term leads. We want to re-engage with lapsed customers. That were those audiences that we've been talking about, the people who've been going on site, getting quotes, or just browsing the site with that sort of wanderlust that we've been talking about before, and then trying to convert them into actually going on trips. We're monitoring competitor insights using some in-house tools that we have. This is looking more at sort of Google search activity, but we can still see from that when competitors are starting to scale up their spend in Google search, and using that to dictate what we're doing within Facebook as well, as and when should we be pushing. And finally, we started looking more at attribution analysis across the different channels, looking at things like first click attribution, positional, weighted, get more of an idea of how a prospecting campaign on social might be influencing paid search further down the line, display further down the line. Go into a bit more detail on re-engaging lapsed customers. Ultimately, as I've mentioned before, we've built up a big pool of users who've demonstrated their interest in traveling, either by visiting the site or getting a speculative quote, whatever it may be. These audiences were all built up within our tags, within CRM systems, and this is where it comes back to that sort of data-driven mentality that James mentioned earlier. Firstly, using this first-party data to retarget these users with specialized messaging, but then also to use these audiences for seeds to drive new lookalike audiences and expand our reach even further. What this all ended up with was through a very uncertain period for travel and for Malatini, we were able to drive consistent results, even though things like budgets and customer intent and ultimately conversion rate were fluctuating massively. And we were able to do this both through the performance model itself, but also through these three key elements that James ran through earlier, and weaving those into our campaign strategy. I think that is the end. That is the end of me. I'm going to pass back to Callum for cross-channel, and I think my internet hopefully held out most of the time there. Looking forward to watching the recording back and seeing how much that actually came through. But Callum, back over to you.
Thank you very much, Jack. And yeah, you made it through. Cool. Just to finally, just to touch upon more than anything, really is obviously is hopefully we've made you aware that we don't just run social. We can look at other channels, and I think as Jack kind of went through with the case study itself, once we're live with a number of channels, there's a lot of really cool stuff that we can do from a cross-channel perspective. The way we entail that is into 3 different approaches that all come together to really form a cross-channel strategy that we build brands. So number 1 is the internal part of that approach. So as working with a number of channels, there's obviously a lot of sharing that can go on between teams, both just with the communication across teams, but also with the tech that we use as well. So the idea of using the GMP and being able to utilize that across search and display, for example, is really exciting. But obviously the performance insights and the data that we can get creatively from social will then have a massive impact on the creative aspects of programmatic display as well. And also, I guess the kind of the feed-based part of it as well, the custom labels that we can build could be built across different channels as well. Another part of this, the remit of our cross-channel approach is the external factors as well. So I don't think you can really go through 2020 without mentioning lockdowns and COVID. One thing that we've built out internally is a lockdown insights tool. So that it will let us know when a market would go into lockdown, or if it's city by city, for example, in the UK, and having that ability enables us to make sure that we optimize our kind of ads towards certain demographics or certain markets, if that was to be the case, especially if it's something that is online only. But also local insights on a worldwide scale is also a really important point to raise. Obviously stuff like Father's Days, Mother's Days, bits like that are different in different markets. So just having the ability to be able to understand this and put this into our campaigns allows us to optimize and really look at it from a granular perspective. And then finally, which is it's probably the coolest area of the cross-channel approach, is the cohesion as well. So you want to make sure that your messaging is right and correct for each user that comes on site, and that is based on your services that you'll have live with. So if you know they're coming through a display ad already, you want to make sure you retarget them based on where they've been on site and what that understanding of what they're looking to buy is. So what we do from a cross-channel perspective is make sure there's that creative cohesion, but also use sequential messaging to make sure that the user journey feels like they're part of that user journey. They're not just getting retargeted with the same ad or the same banner or the same ad copy. So again, something that it's really important to mention from our side and to get across. And obviously we'll be sharing everything across, so you'll have all of the information, but we also have a case study with Nobody's Child, and this is across both the search and social side, which is a great kind of read, and to be able to understand how you would utilize certain channels and certain services to be able to optimize, and all entails into a pure performance model that we've used with them. And as you can see with the stats that entail a 450% increase in social ROAS year on year, and being able to kind of increase their volumes and their growth whilst working to a model that incentivizes us to drive as many sales as possible. Cool. that's kind of it in terms of the social strategy and incubator. I guess the final thing to mention from our side is the next steps. If you're looking to move forward with conversations here, if you've got some clients that you're working with that would like to hear more, this is typically what it would look like. Number one from our side is having an introductory call, and this is to really scope out the opportunity, scope out an understanding of where the brand is with their paid social currently, and how we could potentially look at supporting. I'm happy to move forward after this point. It's the case of running forecasts and auditing any accounts that have been live previously, to really get a good understanding of where we can make the differences. And as James mentioned, within the technical side, making sure the setup is correct. And if not, we're able to kind of use those audits to be able to kind of show them exactly where we might be able to support and to maximize. Once we've run the forecast, we would look to build a strategy together based on the brand and based on the scoping of the calls. We'd then look to run a proposal and run the brand through the strategy and the commercial benefits of working to a model like this. And if they're happy to move forward after that, it would be the idea of getting live and then kind of really making the most of working with that brand. In terms of our requirements and the capabilities, this is kind of what it looks like. Again, this can be really flexible. But the capabilities, as we've gone through within the strategy, is both for targeting and prospecting on a pure performance model. To get up and running, the one thing that we would require is technical implementation of our Facebook event pixel. And again, we're here to support if needed on anything technical related. The markets that we can look at is worldwide, or selected markets. It really depends on your volumes and what you're looking to achieve. To make a pure performance model work, I think it's also important to note kind of the requirements from a metrics perspective. But again, these can be really flexible and can be based on a number of different areas. So the monthly unique visitors we've got down as 50,000, but this can be really flexible. It really depends on the brand, and it also depends on their conversion rates and their AOVs as well. Obviously, if your AOV is going to be higher, we wouldn't expect as much volumes, for example, and similar with a conversion rate. If the conversion rate is really high, obviously the volumes don't need to be as high themselves. So we're always keen to hear from you guys and to kind of see what we can do. So don't be put off by any of the requirements that you see on the screen. Cool. And I guess the final thing to mention is the way that paid social works is a little bit different than search, for example, or CSS, where it completely tracks through a network. Unfortunately for social, you aren't able to track links to social campaigns, just the way that Facebook is set up and not aligned, I guess, with the networks. What we're able to do and the way that it works is we would still provide the media spend. Activity would be run through our Facebook accounts, and would be able to report back on the dashboarding that James ran you through earlier. Everything will be tracked through Facebook itself on their systems. We would still invoice the brand, but the way it would attribute, the way it would be paid is a commission through affiliate future still would be on a 0% bonus commission, for example, would just be bonus our invoices month on month. What that means for a brand is it gives you the ability to work with an agency on a really flexible level. We wouldn't ask for any long-term contracts to be signed, or would ask for as an IO to be placed, which gives us the ability to work with you without any long-term contracts or anything like that, which is obviously a massive benefit to you as a brand, and to us being able to be flexible with the CPAs that we're able to offer and work with you on. Cool. That's us. That's I think, what is the time? I think we've just gone over the 45-minute mark, but I guess, yeah, the floor is open for any questions, or if anyone had anything they wanted to know or anything to ask. We're here now for you. Alternatively, feel free to follow up separately and ask any questions you may have.